I'd like to ask Kevin to kick things off by sort of explaining for all of us what an art advisor does, and describe your process, how you work with collectors, and maybe how you've worked with Trevor over the years to help build his collection.
Right. Okay. I didn't even know such a thing as an art advisor existed when I graduated with my PhD however many years ago, and I think at the time I moved over from academia. My last legitimate job was at Harvard, to just working with private collectors. I felt that it was some sort of giant leap, trading one form of behaving as an art historian for another that felt to me at first perhaps radically commercial or something like that. And indeed, I had to very quickly learn a whole new version of what I already knew. I needed this whole new body of knowledge, which is market knowledge. And if you have a kind of critical idea of an artist's importance, that doesn't necessarily match up with the sort of monetary value of that person. Sometimes they do, but usually these are skewed things. And you have to sort of, in a way, to become an art advisor, I had to sort of relearn the history of photography in a case-by-case way. Specifically, any new given artist, you have to learn that their prints were, the better prints were all made in the 1920s, not the vintage prints, and et cetera. So it's a very complicated world, photography. But I think over the years of doing what I do, I think I've somehow synthesized the two different seeming things, academia and art consulting, into something that really feels more to me just like curating. And I use the word curator now more than I would say I'm an art advisor, because I think that's my model for how I do what I do. I think of I've worked in museums, and I do essentially what curators in museums do, curators for their institution and me for my collectors. I help them decide what to acquire, to decide what pieces are in good shape, or the best ones, or the ones that are most suitable for forming an entire collection. I help them take care of the collection. I help them do things with the collection, such as this exhibition. So I think increasingly to say the word curator in the context of a sort of gallery world is something that seems a little pretentious, just in the same way that I rarely tell any of the gallery people that I'm a doctor, but why not? Because I mean, that's sort of the model for it. And there are lots of different ways of advising. Lots of people do it very differently, but this is the world I come from, and so this is how I do it. And I think for me, it's kind of important to see these two divergent lines coming together. I think it serves the collectors better, and it's certainly more fun for me to sort of feel like I have one foot in the museum still. I teach as well and do crits and things like that. So I'm sort of a hybrid, half academic and half commercial, but I don't even think of it that way anymore. I think I'm simply a curator. So.
And talk about a little bit from your perspective the sort of layering of the art market. We know that with photography especially, there are sort of multiple points of entry where price is concerned, where value is concerned. But can you talk about that structure a little bit? I mean, including the auction houses, which are a very significant part of that, and how you interact with them sort of in parallel with collectors.
Yeah, I mean, part of doing what I do involves knowing lots of people, knowing sources for material, knowing who to call if you want a picture by X artist, or if you're looking for a certain kind of thing. And so, and photography is a very wide-spanning activity. I mean, oftentimes when someone comes to me and wants to employ me to help them collect, it's often because they've got some very complicated situation with a very expensive Man Ray or Edward Weston photograph, a very complicated vintage photograph that they need vetted in some way. They need someone who can call up Paul Messier to do the scientific paper test, to sort of read the research in French about exhibitions, do everything you have to do to justify a price tag, for a very expensive Man Ray, for example. And then the other end of the spectrum is contemporary art. And when a really hot artist such as Christopher Williams has a new show at Zwirner Gallery, the show is sold out before the opening even happens, and you have to be sort of in the club at the gallery. You have to be presented with, the whole list of all of the new works, so that you can have your pick of the litter. And before the show even opens, like there are certain iconic images you identify, and those sell out before the night of the opening. So having access to the art, especially in contemporary, is a super important thing. And just because you have money doesn't mean you can walk into a gallery and buy something. They care about who you are and what your collection is and what your museum connections are. It's a very sort of, it's like adopting a child or something, So, it helps when you become a collector like Trevor and you have a reputation, because once you're known by the galleries, they want to see things go into those collections just as they want to see things go into a museum for the critical reputation of their artist.
So let's sort of look to the other side of this for a second and say, Alec, I'm looking at you because you're someone who's had, all of you have had a lot of commercial success, but you were for several years with one of the biggest galleries on the planet, Gagosian. You've now sort of shifted allegiances, but I imagine you're sort of somewhat familiar with the situation that Kevin just described of being, producing major exhibitions there where the work is oftentimes already committed by the time the exhibition opens. Can you sort of speak to that from the perspective of a working artist?
The truth is that I try to keep some sort of distance from the market, from thinking about the market. One of the reasons I live where I live in Minnesota is so that I can hide out and focus on the making of the work and not feel the industry around me. And it's been, there's just been this enormous learning curve throughout the years, because when I started at a gallery, and and we said, okay, we'll do 3 different sizes, we'll do 5, 10, and 15, and boom, and then off it went, and that sets a precedent in this very complicated world in which everyone is sort of making up the rules as they go along. And so over the years, I've learned a lot about it, but I allow my galleries to do the work for me. They earn their 50%.
Yeah.
Your job is to choose a gallery that will handle you correctly, and so auditioning 5, 10, 15 different sizes, from my point of view, from the collector's point of view, that's not a good thing at all. And I think coming to a single size for an image or something like that is way better for everybody. It sort of presents your work in a better way, and it's way better from the point of view of collecting. You want it to be clear that this was the artist's intention, especially in photography. You want any decision the artist can make about the size or the format or the framing or any of that. That's super important. And
it's true. Although the thing about photography is that it can function in so many different ways. And we had this great moment yesterday where at the press conference where a journalist walked up and asked about the price of a Friedlander. And the Friedlander's there.
And she was very embarrassed to ask that question.
She was embarrassed.
Too, because I think that's the kind of thing you don't ask in a museum.
Right. But it's right there, and it's right next to the Jeff Wall. And how do you explain that this one, by a legend, Friedlander, costs whatever it costs, compared to and you could buy however many, 1,000 of these to buy the Jeff Wall for the same price, and it doesn't make one better than the other. It's just 2 different models of functioning in the marketplace.
Right. Ryan, how about you? You had this major exhibition at the Whitney as as a kind of wee lad, sort of straight out of school. And you're a New York-based person. That's your context as opposed to the Midwest where Alec is. What's your relationship with that whole world been as someone that treasures the way that you work and you have a very specific creative process? How's that been for you?
In the sense of editions and photography?
No, not so much editions, but just sort of in a way. Alec's talking about how he likes to keep a little bit of a distance from that and to let those folks do their work. But for you, how do you live with that, if you like, psychologically, all of that whole mechanism?
I have a lot of people that take care of me. There's no way that I could do that. My brain doesn't work like that at all. And I think that there's so many people in my life that take care of the business side of my operation and just really let me try to be creative, as creative as possible, and not have to be involved with that side of it. My brother's my accountant, which is really good because to keep it in the family, I don't want anybody stealing from me.
Right. Yes.
And I think that I feel like I try not to get involved in it that much. I want to know what I'm able to do. Like how far I can take my journey across America, or how many boxes of fireworks I can buy, or if I want a new, if there's a big project that I really want to do, that just how long I can do it for. And it's always like to take the money that I make from my art to make the adventures kind of longer, and to be able to facilitate the bigger ideas that I want to do, right. That require more people to help me make the image. So that's kind of the way that I approach it. I really try to stay pretty hands off because I think that if I get involved in it, it's just a different side of the brain, and I think that it definitely affects my creativity, and it, sometimes it gets frustrating and gets me down, and it's right. Just yeah.
How long did it take you to sort of figure that out, when you were starting out, back after the Whitney show? Did you sort of settle into that reality quickly, or did you have a few sort of stumbles before you got to that point?
Well, I had a lot of guidance. When I moved to New York, I had a lot of friends that were involved in art and gave me a lot of good advice from the beginning, saying like, keep your editions small, and don't produce too much work, don't put too much out there, and just basically to, I feel like I really came into photography I was really lucky at a time that that there were like forefathers that set it up, like Nan Golden and Cindy Sherman, and people that really were like the pioneers of switching from the art market and bringing photography into the art market, and having to pave the way for generations to follow. So I think that I came in at a good time where someone could say, listen, this is the right way to do it. This is kind of the model for having a successful photography career, and for being able to make work that is still sacred, and that people feel like that they own something, that it's not like a painting, it's not one of them, but maybe there's three of them. So I think that I just got a lot of good advice, and I read a lot of books about photographers that I admired, and just kind of asked a lot of questions, Right. And that's the way that I learn the most, is asking questions. I'm a really visual person, so other than looking at things, I like to just ask people so many, just hit them with 100 questions about like how they did it, how they made it work for them. Right. I got luckily being in New York City was like a really important thing. I think that there was so many artists there that kind of gave me such kind of, generally the same kind of advice, that certain people said the same things to me, that I could say like, okay, like, I guess this is how I should do it.
Right.
But, being an artist, it's such a weird thing, there's no rules. I mean, the art market is the most unregulated market in the world, and it's like like selling drugs. It's crazy, it's, yeah. So, I feel like it's a really weird thing to get involved in, and have to be aware of the financial side of it, and how, how prices can escalate so fast, and just, it's amazing, and it's really tricky, and it's really like, it's definitely a game. So yeah, I'm aware of everything that happens, but I I try to pull back from it as much as possible, because I mean the most important thing is creating the art and being, you know, and just getting in touch with that side of it. So
Great. Thank you, Ryan. So Daniel, for you, you're someone who's, you know, had a lot of teaching experience. I talked about the different teaching positions you've had, and then also this sort of you know, layering of different galleries, or, you know, both in this country and in Europe, who represent you. So how do you sort of put that puzzle together of your teaching and, you know, your relationship to the market and exhibiting and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I feel like I have a slightly different approach in that I actually don't try and separate it from the market. Instead, maybe thinking about it more like, how does, like even in this work that's in the show, there's all of these fake gold nuggets. And so thinking about how meaning is produced and how value is produced through an image and through collecting, through accumulation. And then the other work, which is the Mergers series, is also about kind of excesses and accumulation. And but in terms of the question about me functioning in the market, in a way I feel, you know, kind of it's out of one's hands, right? And so one can produce work that addresses how meaning is produced in relation to the market, but as far as strategy and this kind of thing, I have no clue. And people try and tell me things, and sometimes I take the advice, and sometimes, you know, you just have to listen to the work, right? But then teaching as well, you know, I think the other thing that we have to acknowledge is that being able to not think about the market and being able to remove ourselves from that is such a privilege. I mean, and I don't think it's not a coincidence that it's like the white dude audience up here talking about how we don't have to think about the market, right? So I'm very thankful for that every day. And I in terms of teaching, I think that's a responsibility, right? And I think in terms of teaching, I try and take the privilege of, you know, I teach at RISD, which is a private school, very expensive private school, and but we try and take that as a responsibility to say, hey, let's dedicate ourselves as fully as possible to our work, and acknowledging that we're very lucky for it. So.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. I mean, I'm teaching at Parsons this fall, a class on professional practices, and my job is to try and educate the students about to graduate about this crazy, the drug market, as Ryan calls it, and it really is. I mean, it's so irrational, but it does have its own rules. But you have to understand how that works. And at this point, I think, you know, we all have absorbed it. We understand enough to do what we do, but it can be completely mystifying to a graduating student. It's mystifying to my friends who are professors. You know, they don't understand, you know, what goes on, and so you know, it is something you just kind of have to throw yourself into, or have some sort of perspective on it at some point to really absorb that. But I think it makes me feel more, as an art historian, it makes me feel more well-rounded. Like, this was the piece of knowledge I needed to have in order to be a full art historian. It's funny, but it circles around that way in my mind. Like, this is something that art historians should have to know too. And curators kind of get this over time because they're going to galleries and buying things for the museum and all of that. But professors, if I had become a professor, which is what I thought I would have done, thought I was going to do, I'd probably still be sort of, you know, half stupid. So, I mean, I already am still half stupid, but yeah.
And in fact, my gallerists were academics before, and then became gallerists. And so, in a sense, I saw a similar struggle. It's different than, and so now I'm with a different gallery that's coming from a commercial background.
Right.
And so it should be interesting to see this change too.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the market a little bit more, I want to just dig in a little bit. Kevin, I'm looking at you because I know that you work closely with the auction houses and you have clients that are really keen or desperate even to get a specific picture, and that's where you sort of access your web of contacts and colleagues and so forth. But talk about that sort of tiering system a little bit in the market, if you can, for people.
Oh, the market, the auctions. There are auction people here tonight. I have to be careful. But auctions are very seductive to collectors as they're starting out. These catalogs arrive. They're glossy. You know, it's like the J. Crew catalog used to be, or something. You know, and people are very seduced by that, and also the competitiveness. There's something about buying something publicly, you know, at auction. You want to win. It's almost erotic, you know, bidding on something at auction, and people lose their heads and they spend too much. And also, too, I mean, if you don't know galleries, and there are gazillions of galleries who are selling work, you know, there'll be something in an auction that is available retail right now in 2-3 places. But if you don't know that and you go into the auction and bid on it, you can go crazy against someone else who doesn't know that, and, you know, spend way too much. So, you know, one thing that I'm always doing, especially with a sort of new collector, is we use the auction catalogs to talk about what they're interested in, because you get to look at tons of material. And so there'll be a week of photography auctions in the spring and a week of contemporary auctions, and you have all this, you know, merch to look at. And then, but I always sort of try to pull them back and say, okay, what here? It generates lots of ideas. You know, I usually end up going to the galleries the week after and buying these things we had talked about. But sometimes, you know, you do kind of two things. You watch things to see if they don't go up to the retail value and you try to get them for a good price, or you identify things that are super rare that you haven't seen, will never see. You don't always know this for sure, especially with vintage pictures. You don't know how many prints are really in the world. And if it's something like that, then you go crazy. And I mean, you go over the estimate, way above it, if you're confident that this is a really rare thing and it's right for this particular collection. So I guess I feel like with auctions, I'm always kind of trying to, auctions are where I'm often cautioning the collectors the most and pulling them back. I was in a situation one time with somebody where we were going really high on something, and I had him on the phone, and it was a great piece, and it was worth going crazy over. But we were bidding against, you know, what was obviously, you know, like a shake or something like that. And you know, I was in the room and I saw what was happening, and he was on the phone with me, and I just cut him off at one point. I said, you know, we're way over this artist's record. It's okay to break an artist's record for a certain piece if you have a lot of confidence in it. But I cut him off and said, I'm not bidding again. It stops here. And he was angry about this for a while, the one that got away. But you know, the thing is that this was a Cindy Sherman, and it wasn't Trevor, it was someone else. But there are other Cindy Shermans, and there are other pictures that you could spend money, and you don't want to be driving up the prices either, because that's then what becomes the public record for an artist and justifies higher prices in the galleries. And you know, gallerists don't run back and just like raise their prices automatically, most don't, but because artists need to have a kind of slow, steady ascent. Their careers are built in a certain way, which is very important. But yeah, auctions can be very dramatic, and in a way, one of my biggest, you know, I think skills as a Midwestern boy is that I can sort of keep a cool head in those situations. And you know, a lot of things happen. That, you know, like the cell phone doesn't work. You drop the call. Like I was recently bidding for 2 people at once. I was at one sale and there was another sale going on, and I was on the phone bidding on one thing and bidding on the other thing in the room. This is insane. But I could see it coming, and I thought surely this won't happen, but of course it did. You know, so yeah, auctions are very exciting. You know, it's very exciting, and it's a great way to see lots of material. But you have to sort of know what you're doing in those situations. It's timed. You have to be on it at that instant when you do it. You have to know how much you're going to spend on it. I see people just making it up as they're bidding, and they don't know if they're going to bid again. It's very slow. I think Denise is here. Like the lowest price pieces are often the ones that take the longest to sell, because everyone's so hesitant. You know, they're just waiting in. Meanwhile, if it's some sort of giant Rothko or something, everyone in the room knows exactly what they're doing and how high they're going to go, and it just goes up, 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 and it's over. You know. Yeah. So.
To me, I mean, I work for an institution. I'm responsible for a collection that's housed within the walls of an institution. And so my sort of position in that situation is very different from yours. And it's interesting to hear you talk about your relationship with the auction houses, because for me, one of the things I've observed in the last decade is an extraordinary increase in the best possible way of the scholarship within the auction houses. I mean, you mentioned the sort of J. Crew catalogue. I mean, the catalogues are beautiful, they're very seductive, but they have fantastic scholarship in them.
Well, especially the Sotheby's catalog.
Yeah.
The Sotheby's people are known for that. They do real research and they have knowledge,
Right,
and they put that out there, which helps people to decide. It's marketing, but it's also a contribution to scholarship.
It really is, and I wanted to make that point because obviously there's lots of tongue-in-cheek things we can say about the market, but I think in terms of the way you operate, your sort of academic underpinnings, I think that the auction houses are really the best of them, the best personnel within them are really helping to sort of raise the game and increase the quality of collecting. One of the things about Trevor and the way he collects is he has this great intelligence. He knows what he's looking for. He asks the right questions. He does his research. And you can do that, obviously. You need the motivation to do that, but you also need to know who to make that phone call to so that you can get the right answer to the right question. And
I feel a lot of times, too, I feel like there's no certainty sometimes in what you're doing, especially with vintage photography. You don't know how many prints exist or, so sometimes I feel, or the story has holes in it. It's a Man Ray, and you only know this much about it. You don't know the full provenance. This one's not signed. Is that important? This kind of thing. But sometimes I feel like I'm just listening. I feel like I'm on Law and Order, and I love thinking I'm this way. Is that I'm I'm interviewing all of the people, and I'm sort of deciding what is the most believable scenario for this, and sometimes that's all you can have when you're going to buy something, especially with vintage photography. Like you only know so much, and at a certain point you say, okay, is this believable? Will this ever be disprovable? These kinds of questions. And there are certain things like technologies, like conservation technologies, which I think will increasingly be better at dating papers and things like that, which could change a lot of valuations in the future. And that's both really exciting because it will rationalize something that's been really kind of murky, but it will also, for a lot of people, probably overnight almost sort of change what they have. And
right.
Yeah.
Just want to change the tack of the conversation for a second and go to you, Alec. Last spring, you were part of a magnum initiative, a sort of road trip from San Antonio to Oakland that finished up. Some of you might have seen that show, a pop-up show, Postcards from America, at the Starlight Social Club in Oakland. And then I think this spring you've just had a follow-up project, if I'm not mistaken, the House of Pictures. So to me, I want you to talk about it from the point of view of your artistic practice, but I think there's also an interesting kind of it relates to this issue of the market and how you get your work out there and how people consume it. So can you talk about the sort of motivations behind that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I want to communicate and I want to share things with people, and so I want to function within different marketplaces so I can do that. I mean, in this question between Jeff Wall and Friedlander, I mean, the issue with Friedlander is that he's so productive. But I don't think any of us want Friedlander to only make 5 pictures a year. It's not what he's about. The spirit of the work is that productivity. And so for myself, the spirit of the work is sharing it in different ways. And so with these Magnum projects, it's really been about a grassroots, produce something, throw it up on the wall, let the community experience it. And also with this Little Brown Mushroom publishing venture, I try to make books as inexpensively as I can. Because, a big part of the audience for the work are, for better or worse, is young photographers. And it bums me out when they can't buy anything. Even books they can't buy anymore. So to produce some things, newspapers, things like that are available is great. And photography functions so well on different levels in a way that painting doesn't.
And I mean, you were part of a group of people that did that. So I mean, when you're speaking in the first person, I mean, are you really speaking for that whole group and saying what you're saying, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different marketplace. So Magnum is involved in, in the world of photo agencies and magazines, and that world, has undergone tremendous changes, and right now is on its last legs. And so people need to reinvent how pictures are shared through magazines and online, and the commerce of that. Everyone's trying to scrambling around trying to figure it out, and I think there's actually a lot of reason for optimism, because I mean the web is just an unbelievable tool for sharing. So I've been really involved with blogging, and so with these Magnum projects, we've used Tumblr and just putting it out there in a way that Magnum normally is quite restrictive, watermarks and images, we hide them, so just changing the culture of that and not being afraid to share work.
Right. How about for you, Ryan? Because you've done fantastic magazine work and sort of commissioned work over the years. Your work was regularly in the major magazines and papers. So what's your relationship to that? How that works for you?
Early on, I was working for the New York Times magazine quite a lot. The photo editor there is this woman, Kathy Ryan. She's a really wonderful woman who was a fan of my work and really gave me a lot of opportunities as a young photographer to travel around and see the world and get to do these amazing photo essays. I really love magazines. I think that they're an extension of the gallery, and I think it's something that being a photographer that you can do to really connect with a larger audience. And I think I've used them in that way for a really long time. And also books. I've made a lot of books since I started out. I used to make handmade books. Even just being a teenager, I would always make photocopy zines. Me and my friends, and we'd give them to each other, and just they weren't even photographs. They were just stuff that we thought were cool. Just a representation of our spirit. And I've always been in magazines, and now just blogs and having using every outlet possible to basically reach the widest possible audience for the work. And I really like it. I think that I communicate with an audience that normally wouldn't go to museums or galleries. Usually when I have shows, a lot of people call up and they say well, how much is admission, or do I have to wear a suit to come to the opening?
Right.
And I really love that, because it makes me remember that I'm communicating with someone who normally wouldn't go to a gallery. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important that, they'll come to the show, and maybe they'll go to more galleries, and maybe that will be it'll become part of their world. But I think it's something that photography, can really do. It's just, and when you group images together, you could start telling stories, and it creates a narrative, and you really can seduce people with the world that you create. And it's very important to me.
Mm. And how about for you, Daniel? I mean, you've made photographic bodies of work, but you're also an artist that expresses himself with very different, all sorts of other materials as well. So, how do you see this sort of area that we're talking about, the territory of books and alternative outlets?
It's pretty unfamiliar, right? So it's a very photographer way to think about producing works and producing books. And I have a studio mate of mine as a photographer and also things like that. But I definitely lean towards the painting model. And I think even at least the arrangement photo in the show speaks as much to painting as it does to photography. And I really think of myself as a studio artist in that sense as well. But in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of producing meaning by just a sequence of images or arranging images, collecting images, editing yourself, trying to discover something, I can relate in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about, because we've sort of discussed this in different contexts, you and I know you and Kevin have talked about a little bit the notion of sort of collecting in your work in particular, sort of how you gather material together to do what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the main goal for me as an artist is to learn something, to take pleasure in making something. And so it begins in the studio, it begins through research, it begins through looking at images, and you put one image next to another or one thing next to another, and you maybe discover something, maybe you don't, and you keep going, and you try and produce a situation that allows for chance and humor and pleasure, and slowly you build something. You know, and one thing I love about this collection and being in this collection is that it's got this irreverence, and it's got this sense of humor and a sense of improvisation that's nice. That's nice to be in. So.
I'm glad you sort of brought us back to the collection, the Traina Collection, which is on view here now. And maybe, Kevin, you just to sort of redirect the conversation a little bit, you can talk about that relationship, building that specific collection. And I mean, you've been giving a lot of good background about the sort of larger world of photography, but talk about the collection a little bit and sort of how you've, just the shaping of it with the collector.
Well, any collection is about the individual who makes it, really. I mean, I don't actually have a lot of ego in the collections. I facilitate them in a way. I'm the sort of background chorus. I affirm, I make things better, I find something better, I smarten something up, whatever. I don't have that much control over it, actually, which is good. And I think, you know, it's a process for an individual who's collecting to really figure out who they are through what they're acquiring. And sometimes in the beginning, you know, there's a little bit of murkiness, and once you see, you know, 5, 10, 20 things, you start to see a sensibility emerging, and that's the point when I get better at identifying what that person really wants. I say that's a Trevor picture right there, or from this new show of work by Nan Golden, you know, this is the one that you should have because there's this Baroque edge to the collection, and because you have a sort of dark streak, and it's also really kind of Venetian looking, and I mean, these things are kind of descriptors of Trevor in a certain way. So, and I always find it interesting too that all of the collectors I've worked with, the half dozen or so over the last 10 years, they're all married, but there's usually only one person who's building the collection. And it's funny to me that I spend so much intimate time with the one person who's doing the collection. And then, you know, every 6 months or something, I'll see Alexis or something, and there's always a moment when I'm sort of cornered and I get this sort of, you know, firestorm of, can you not hang this here, and can you get him to not do this, or can you get her to not do this kind of thing, or why do we have so much of this, or can you pull back on this kind of thing? And so you see these people who are sort of, you know, experiencing the collection, but in a very different way. But it often, the point I'm trying to make is that I think a collection is so personal, it actually needs to be, in a certain way, just one person. Like, I think, and that is what makes the best collections. I think actually that's what makes private collections often better than public collections, because they have this idiosyncratic, personal, you know, style, and the best thing you can see is a collection that looks and behaves like the person who's built it. And so all the people I've worked with are extremely different people, but for me, I have this almost a kind of, I almost have to be a kind of psychiatrist, or maybe it's more mystical to that or something. I have to be very intuitive about who they are and what they really are wanting to do, and my job is just to come with the sort of the knowledge and the connections and the judgment and the taste and be able to make suggestions, but really it's just about facilitating that person in whatever journey they're on doing it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and there are other colleagues in the audience that work for institutions that I'm sure would say the same thing in a different way, but to me it's one of the fascinating parts of my job with an institution, which is to get to know, of course, the artists, but the collectors too, because it's a very personal relationship. It's a very privileged relationship because you get to sort of enter their lives in a very specific kind of way. And then in the case of the project that we've just delivered here, you get to then represent it in a museum context where, you know, we hope obviously hundreds of thousands of people will come and see it. It's a very big thing. It's a big deal.
It's kind of a strange experience actually to take, you know, something that's so personal, you know, Trevor's collection off the walls, and write a historical narrative about it. My essay doesn't talk about Trevor collecting or anything, but his collection formed a perfect, you know, sort of span of all of the examples I needed. You know, miraculously, it all just sort of was there to write a whole history of contemporary photography, and that was a very satisfying, interesting thing to see happen. You know, I didn't even know maybe going into the essay if it was going to do that or not, but it sure did. And so that's a very exciting thing to see, that something that's so personal and idiosyncratic can also be a public narrative that makes sense to a lot of people and contributes something to a larger, you know, history, critical history of art.
Yeah, and the other, we haven't really brought up gallerists yet, or dealers that much, but the great gallerists and dealers that are in this country, they have a huge role in this whole process too, and the very best of them are scholarly, they're smart, they have great sort of instincts and interpersonal skills so that they know what their collectors love, they can work with the artists, they can establish that rapport that is a kind of, it's like the intangible of a sensitivity that allows the very best collections to grow. And any of the great collectors that I've ever met have usually had one or two or three sort of anchor dealers or gallerists that help them shape their vision. And it's wonderful to sort of watch that from, not from the sidelines, but from another perspective on the playing field that I have, and see how that happens.
I'll just add too, you know, that even that sort of an arrangement of three dealers who advise you also limits what you're doing in a certain way. And I think one of the great things about Trevor's collection is the diversity of it. The things come from all kinds of different places, and you know, that's a better thing to have, I think, ultimately, because it shows more adventure, it shows more breadth, shows more. There are a lot of unexpected things happening in the collection, and for a photography collection especially, that at this moment, that's a super important thing to see happening, because it is this kind of shake-up moment. In photography, it's a moment of redefining what photography is, and you know, I think, you know, having Daniel in the collection especially is important, because he's not really a photographer, but you know, it can be there, and it just opens up the discussion. So,
yeah. I would just say I've made about 4 photos or 4 artworks that ended as prints, and they're in this collection. But the other thing I want to talk to about that is, you know, there's a real difference in collectors too. I mean, I've never met most of the people that own my work, and then the few that I have can become friends, right? And it shows, and you can see a real difference of someone that, say, is willing to hike out to Brooklyn and come to the studio and learn a bit about it, the work, and kind of make a discovery. So that's something that Trevor did as well. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Alec already mentioned the press conference that we had yesterday morning, but one of the really magical components of that was the being able to witness the dialogue between the collector and the artist in front of the pictures. And you get this wonderful synergy of you know, passion and instinct, and Alec was standing in front of his pictures, and I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, Alec, but these were your words out of your mouth. But talking about the longing in your pictures and how you're trying to convey, how to try to illustrate what longing looks like, what love looks like, and you know, knowing Trevor as I do now, hearing him talk about his work so passionately and so sort of eloquently. Just seeing that sort of come alive in the gallery context is fabulous, and I think that, you know, that's sort of ultimately what our job is as an institution, to sort of put those relationships together and, you know, communicate them and prepare them for a general audience who hopefully can see those things and other things too, of course.
Right, and for me, I mean, what's really interesting about this experience is that, I mean, photography is very much the art of collecting. You're collecting these little moments and trying to possess little fragments out of the world, and you're shaping your own little narrative out of it. And then you send these fragments back out into the world, and someone else who's passionate collects them and reassembles them and creates a new narrative. And so in the catalog, I mean, my favorite moment for myself was this flip between my picture of a supermarket cashier and your merger's photograph, and so the work just takes on this entirely other meaning, where it becomes about commerce and high and low, and I love having it open to this other meaning through someone else's collection.
Through someone else's mode of presentation,
Yeah.
right. Daniel, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the process and thinking about process and thinking about you guys, and I was like, are there common traits? And but one thing I was thinking about is how there's a real dedication to just looking instead of telling, right? So I think a lot of artists tell. And I think what I find interesting about both of your works is this, like, going out and there's this feeling as a viewer in front of your works that feels like a discovery that you have with the artist, and that's so, I think, crucial and what makes the work so good. So,
Ryan.
It's just really nice to have a collector that is so obsessive and enthusiastic about photography, you know? Because I think being an artist, it's just in our nature to be completely obsessive and totally crazy about this one thing that we do. And I got to meet Trevor 2 years ago, and you know, it's also really exciting to see your artwork in somebody's house, you know, where it ends up. That's such a cool feeling to, like, you know, see your photograph next to their bed that they sleep in every night, or, you know, above the staircase when you walk up, and you just see it there and you think, like, wow, this person is living with my photograph, you know, for years, and they see it every day. And it's just it just feels so good, you know, that somebody appreciates what you do so much that they want to live with it, and they want it in their bathrooms, and they want it, you know, above their couch, and that they want to cover every square inch of their house with it, you know, which is what Trevor does, you know. It's when I went to his house, and just to see him, it's like a kid in a candy shop, and he was like, wait, okay, go see the Martin Parr right here, and oh, wait, let me take you to this room, and you can see the Arbus twins, and okay, wait, ready, your photograph is here, and you walk up, and it's just, you know, it's such a warm feeling to see, you know, because I just feel like, you know, when you make work, I don't really know how I make work, you know, like, I don't know, in my mind I have an idea of, I always think about it in books. I feel like that's the first thing that I go to, just being a photographer, like, you know, and a collector myself. I'm so interested in books and collecting photography books, and, you know, just being able to access those all the time. And then to think of the image on the wall in a museum is something that I know for a long time, because I've been going to museums since I was a kid, and that's just in my DNA of, like, knowing that, okay, this is one place it goes and this is another place it goes, but actually seeing somebody's collection, you know, of just Trevor's collection of photography over time, basically, you know, the last 50 years of photography, and it's amazing to see it, and to see it on wallpaper, and to see it in a room full of peacock feathers, or to see it next to a garage that is painted like Aladdin, and just, you know, how amazing that is to see it all interact together, and to also just, you know, I think just spending the last few days with Trevor and hearing him talk about his collection is that, you know, Trevor lets me be weird. And, like, that's what I'm good at, is just kind of, you know, that's just turning my weird lifestyle into an art form, and to have someone buy my photographs and let me continue this lifestyle is so important, you know, and to let me have that time to think and not have to answer to the man and like just be able to do this thing. And I think that's the thing when I was watching him talk over the last few days, that I just thought, wow, this guy, you know, it's amazing that, you know, he's able to facilitate my weirdness. And it's...
Is that called an enabler, right?
Yeah, we've got dealers, addicts, enablers.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. I'd like to open it up to questions now from the audience. We'd love to have your participation, questions for any of the panelists. We're not going to distribute a mic, so if you could just use your daytime voices, I'll repeat the question so we can sort of catch it on tape. But we'd love questions, comments from all of you, please, as we sort of wind down a little bit. There must be someone there to get the ball rolling. Yes, sir.
I know in my own field, rapid technological change, and where do you think it's leading us?
So the question was about technology and change, and where do you think that's leading us for the kids on the stage?
It's going to change the face of photography. I mean, now that everyone is taking so many photos with, you know, their cell phones and with digital cameras, and it doesn't cost anything to make photographs anymore. That I think photography is really in for an amazing change happening, and I couldn't tell you what that's going to be, but something will happen that
Yeah, I was just thinking, well, there's the Joseph Beuys said everyone's an artist, but maybe now everybody is also a curator, a collector, a distributor, publisher. Right.
I think it's a moment of hybrids. Someone's written about this. I didn't just make that up, but people, especially surviving this phase we're going through, which has an economic component, but it's also a big cultural shift and technological shift. Everybody's, who's surviving it is kind of doing 2, 3, 4 things. Everybody is suddenly something, and I think that it's interesting the way I feel that that's how I live, and it's interesting to see people in other fields doing the same thing. And I think even artists are now curating and editing and doing more of the jobs that other people sort of used to do. But I think that's part of the change that's happening, and part of the evolution and part of the fun, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, the answer, just for myself, is it's increased the value of narrative and authorship, because you did once have to be a scientist to be able to produce an image, and now it isn't about that at all. And truly, like right now as we speak, millions of great images are being produced around the world, and so the value of the decisive moment and all of that is decreased for me, but the value of putting these moments together and of authorship is increased, and it's still very hard to put together 50 pieces as a photographer or as a collector that have value.
Right. I mean, I think if you look at the statistics, whatever it is, 8 billion images being produced per year. One of the things that interests me as someone that works within an institution and cares for objects, I'm a custodian of objects, is that and it's back to your question about technology, is that there's a smaller percentage, increasingly smaller percentage of images which are being made into objects. And for me, that's one of the reasons why collecting, whether it's in the private environment or in the institutional environment, is becoming, is so important, because those are the individuals, those are the institutions that are making these choices based on where the artists started. And I don't think that that's ever going to change, but just the selection process is going to become more and more significant somehow, because that's going to be the material that becomes the way of analyzing and historicizing that moment, that culture. And so, to me, that's one of the fabulous, very interesting moments that we're moving into now in photography, is that kind of tension there.
I think there's an emergence of authorities, and it's a moment when it's not just in collecting or photography or anything, but it's a moment when there's so much stuff in the world. It's becoming increasingly important to identify yourself, or to identify the sort of authority on something. And the rules have changed radically in terms of how you become the authority. You can become the authority through a blog or something, you know. But these people, us, hopefully, you know, all of us, wield some sort of power by having a particular perspective on something and being able to select from all the flotsam and jetsam of the world, whether it's photographs or whatever, select a certain, you know, group of things, create the narrative, and have that mean something to a large group of people. So I think there's a kind of shakeout happening, and you know, the survival of books, the survival of objects, they will survive, but there's a kind of separation happening between just all of the sort of plethora of stuff and a selection of finer things, of groupings of finer groupings of things. Like this is sort of occurring increasingly, I think.
But also for, you were talking about narrative has become more important to you. For me, it's also surface and material and the in-person. So how the image functions on the screen, backlit. And it should be interesting now with iPads and everything to see what kind of art is produced for looking good on a backlit screen. And so for me,
what kind of art resists that too, and
what's not reproducible, and what gets left out of this new kind of image culture. But then also just in terms of very like technical printing, scale, all of these things have become increasingly important to me.
Yeah, and then the way that meaning gets sort of ciphered through that. I apologize, all of you have been looking at images on this screen which are pretty terrible, actually. I was talking to our technician before that, you know, we've got a technical problem with our projector. We need to get it upgraded, but it's sort of a reminder that this is, you know, these are one form of, you know, consuming an image, and then you walk. I hope you'll all do this after this event. Walk 100 feet down the corridor, and you'll be in the gallery, and you'll be mesmerized by the original object. So, I think that you know, there's all. The other thing that comes into play, again, back to your question, is how meaning gets presented and translated and iterated.
And it's so specific to the factor of the object, how meaning is so based on how the thing is made, what size it is, the intensity of the red. I mean, these things are all kind of critical, and in the reproduction and dissemination of images, you really don't understand things in the same way. So.
Yeah. Another question, please, from someone. In the front row, madam.
Yes.
How do you choose which of the works you're going to release into the world? That was the question for the photographers.
I feel like it's a gut feeling. It's just, I know I can, I mean, I have probably a different process than these two guys, but I shoot quite a lot of photographs when I'm working, because it's really about finding the moment. And then when I see the image, I just know that that's the image. Usually it's about 3 or 4, and I'll put them up on the wall and just have them in my peripheral vision for about a few weeks, and it really becomes evident like which one is the most important image.
It's really tough to answer that question because, you know, as I said, you know, I'm creating this personal narrative, and that's one thing, and I do try to keep some sort of distance from thinking about the marketplace at the beginning for that. And then the gallery comes in, there's a discussion with them about, you know, what works as standalone pieces. And then there's this fascinating experience where you have an exhibition and things just emerge as the chosen ones. And it's bizarre. It's like, why does a song become a top 40 hit? It's like, there's no explaining it, and I never predict it. And I always leave things out of the book that people like later, and so I'm terrible at that process. But it just happens over time. And then there are sleepers too, which are, you know, just these great images. And one of the things that I think is really exciting about this show is that there are sleepers. And for my own work, I think that picture of the girl in the supermarket, I love that picture, but it's not the most collected.
Right. Yeah. Daniel, did you want to answer?
Oh, well, I mean, at least with the large arrangement photos, I spent 3 months on making 3 images, and those were the 3 that I showed. So there was no editing process in a sense.
Right. Very efficient. But why don't you talk about your merger series, which is so witty, so clever. That was a different type of collecting, gathering, sort of. So it was a different set of maneuvers that you were making, and the editorial process was quite extended, right? I mean, different set of situations.
I mean, it was the 1990s and Clinton deregulation, I'm always collecting images, either clipping them or at the time starting to download them off the internet, and then I just you get one pair and you're like, that's kind of a funny pair of two, like a press conference of a corporate merger being announced, the celebration. And then I noticed them coming up again, and then I started looking for them. I was like, maybe I should go find some business magazines, and so I found this grouping, and then they were actually all, not taken by me, and so they were all composed very differently, very scaled differently, and so I merely cropped them down, got rid of the backgrounds, changed the coloring and all this kind of thing to create a cohesive work.
Right.
There's also sizing, and that's really important once you decide on the final image and what that's going to be, to figure out what size it looks right in. And the way that I do it is I'll print it in about 7 or 8 different sizes, from about 8 by 10 inches to about 8 by 10 feet, and look at them all on the wall at the same time. And then you gravitate towards the size that the photograph looks right in. Because it's like trying on a pair of jeans or something like that. You just can't tell by looking at the final image of like the 4x6 print that you get of it, or the color copy of it, and you really have to see them in all different sizes, and then you have to decide the color of it also. Basically to bring the sky in, or the color of the person's skin, or whether things should be darker, things should be lighter, and how you're going to relate to that image.
Next question, yes, ma'am.
Particular question for Ryan. Your photograph of Tom fall away.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that and how you did it? And
Sure.
Yeah. So the question was, how was Tom Fall Away made?
The image that she's talking about is of a person, you don't see their face, and the model is falling off of a broken down church structure that's very old and dilapidated. I travel the United States every summer. I've been doing that for the last decade. And we usually will go on the road from between 1 to 3 months and shoot every single day across the U.S. And I had a location. We try to plan as many locations as we can find, searching the internet or looking through books, and try to make an itinerary. And the location that I had was probably about 100 feet away from where the photo took place. And it was late at night, and I went in the woods to pee, and I saw this amazing structure covered in ivy and weeds, and I just knew that the place that I wanted to shoot at wasn't the right place, and we had to shoot at this broken down church. So we spent about 2 hours clearing it out to make the photograph, and I travel with a stuntman fall mat, so it's basically like an airbed times 100, and you blow it up, it's about 20 feet by 20 feet by 8 feet high, and you can fall safely onto it from anything. And so I work with usually about 4 models, and I had everyone kind of falling in different ways onto this airbag from the church structure. And when I got the photographs back, the way that the model was falling in that pose was just such a striking gesture to me. The way that his fingers were spidered and his body was curled, and he just kind of did it so uniquely. And then that's how that image was made.
Yes, over there, madam.
When a photo becomes,
So the question was sort of about editions, how you control the number of copies of particular photographs that you made.
You just decide the edition, and that's all you print. So with my photographs, I make 3 prints, and then that's all that exists of that photograph. And then the photo can be in books or magazines or postcards or be online, but the final photograph that's printed on photographic C paper, and that exists in whatever size it exists in, that there's only 3 of those.
But it is something that varies from person to person, and so, you know, I'm not sure about Friedlander, but someone like Elliot Erwitt would not edition his pictures, and so he can, if it, it doesn't either. So if it's that great picture, he can print it over and over again, but that just affects the price of it.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about print collection?
It is. I mean, I've worked at sort of 3 major museums in this country, the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the High Museum in Atlanta, Georgia, and now the Fine Arts Museums. I mean, each of those museums very different in nature, different communities, different collecting communities within those cities. And that particular model that you mentioned, the sort of print collecting group that's affiliated with the museum, it hasn't existed for me in either one of those places. And Atlanta it's not a small city. It's as large as 5 million people that live there, but it's a different kind of art market, I would say, than certainly New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. So we didn't have at that institution a print collecting sort of arm, as it were, affiliated to the institution. It was more a kind of support group, a group of individuals who are interested in certainly in collecting, but also interested in educating themselves around the medium of photography, becoming more informed, both from a historical and academic perspective, but also from a collecting perspective. But that sort of model is not really widely followed by the major institutions across the country, because to all intents and purposes, major institutions have a primary sort of group of collectors who really support aggressively the work that they do in building their permanent collections. And so it's sort of one-to-one relationships more than a kind of club or council relationship, at least in my experience. Just as I was leaving the Getty Museum in 2005, they established there a photographic council, which has had a really significant effect, as far as I know, on the growth of that museum's collection from 2005 to now. And it seems to be really a great direction for them to move in. But that was somewhat of a radical conversation at the time, just as I was leaving, that they would do that, because it involved people from auction houses, dealers, and folks from throughout the kind of ecosystem that we're talking about, becoming more involved with that museum, which is has the largest endowment of any museum on the planet, pretty much. But they found a way to make it work, and I think that it's invigorated their program in a really interesting way. So it exists in different kinds of models around the country, but not what you just described is, to me, a sort of 1970s type model. It doesn't really work that way today, as far as I'm aware.
I was actually asking about programs where the institution actually releases, like Alex would do 50 prints for SF camera work, and there is it's an edition of 50, and they sell them for whatever, $300.
These things do exist. I mean, the Walker Art Center, for the exhibition I had there, produced a special print, and generally I'm involved with that on the more kind of charitable side of things. And there is this kind of, which is a nice sort of gateway drug for people to get into collecting. There's those charity auctions. So.
Right, but it's another. I guess what we're getting to in your question for your follow-up is that it's a different sort of layer in this sort of multi-layered cake that you've brought up through your question. Yes, Alexis.
Julian, I have a question for the Revolved.
So how early were these artists sort of expressing themselves through their visual?
But I want to know
how.
Wow, It's going to be a long answer.
I'm dying to know.
You want to take this one first?
You must have been really young, because you got...
I can't remember a time that I wasn't expressing myself. And I was, I work with the human body now, and I was always drawing pictures of naked people growing up. It was just big boobs and really, but I always wanted to be a painter, and I painted and drew my whole life. I never took a photograph ever, even through college. I didn't study photography. But I think I can't imagine not being able to do it. I don't think I would if I couldn't express myself. I think, in a way, I really feel like photography and art saved me. That if I didn't have it, I would definitely be dead. I think it's so important that it's such a healing thing for me, and it always has been my whole life. Just growing up, I feel like I was such an outsider in school, and it was really hard for me. And if I didn't have art, I would have been pretty doomed. So I think that it's just such a wonderful thing that it exists, and I can't imagine a second going by without thinking about it or being able to make something happen.
Yeah, this is sort of the therapy portion of tonight's discussion, but it's true. I mean, because in my own case, I was this really socially awkward, painfully shy person, and so I made pretend worlds and forts and all of that. And photography is the exact opposite of that. It's about going out in the world and having these encounters with other people, and so and I didn't discover it until much later. Also, it's sort of late in college. And it continues to be this sort of social therapy for me. And now I sit in front of crowds like this and talk. It's just bizarre.
Right. Let's move on from that, unless you want to let go of certain things, Daniel.
Please move on.
Okay. We're about to wrap up here, but a question up in the front, please.
Thank you.
So the question was about the sort of sources for prints for collectors, galleries, auction houses, etc. So alternative sources, I guess that was the question.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are artists who don't have galleries, and you find them, they find you, or something like that. Sometimes private collectors who you want to sell something, or there are rules you must abide. There are certain rules for maintaining your relationships with people, and you don't want to be involved in resale of something that should go through a gallery or something like that. But sometimes it's just sort of as it comes at you, and at this point people know about me and find me to target me with some weird collection of something they found, or some artist who doesn't have a gallery, or I get presented with a lot of things that just kind of show up in my inbox. And I go out to some studio visit or sit with the widow for 3 hours, who has this whole thing. And so there are lots of different ways it happens, but I mean, primarily the most obvious sources are the auction houses and the galleries. And there's it's sort of like the French court. I mean, you have to know those people and abide by a certain kind of etiquette, and know sort of, it's business, but it's very genteel, which is what I sort of like about the art world. So,
it wasn't addressed to me, but there's one thing I want to bring up, which is because I think it's a great way into collecting is vernacular photography, and because it's a way to develop your aesthetic cheaply and to figure out what you're interested in.
Yeah, no, I don't collect art, but I do really, because I have a collection of vernacular photography, as most photo geeks, have developed at some time in their lives. Right now, I can't look at another box of photographs at a flea market, but for 25 years of my life, every weekend I was doing that. It's all in a storage unit on 29th Street now in New York. But I have a huge collection of that stuff, and the pictures cost 50 cents each or something. I mean, I might have spent $10 one time on something, but.
If you're thinking about collecting photography and you might want to get into it, just start out by buying 2 copies of every book and get an X-Acto knife and just cut the picture out and frame it and put it up and see if you want to live with it. And then everyone will come over and say, I didn't know that that artist made that in that size.
If you frame it properly.
Yeah. One more question, then we'll call it a wrap. Yes, please, over here. So the question was, I think you probably all heard it, was, if I heard it right, was how photographers will, I mean, the kind of attention they'll pay to their materials, correct?
The story behind it.
Okay, I think
The question is how important is process to the meaning of the work?
Yeah. I don't know. I think whenever I'm talking to students and doing crits, and I mean, I have a particular position which is within an institution. I care for objects. I care what they're made of and how they're put together and how they work in the present moment and how I imagine they'll survive over time, their longevity, if you will. I mean, I always talk, and I think I can speak for my fellow curators, they always talk to students, to artists about their materials and the kind of prudency of certain choices over others. But I think, I'm a temporary custodian of a museum collection that I want to last for as long as possible. So it's vitally important for every object that comes under my care to be built for the distance, to have a kind of integrity to it that will stand the test of time. So, and there's a whole structure underneath that with conservators and people that care for the work to make that so. But it's, that shouldn't actually interfere with the needs of the artist to express themselves. It's the responsibility of the institution to figure out a way to care for it long term. But I certainly, I like to dig into that conversation when I'm talking to artists and I'm talking to students, because I think that if they're serious about what they're doing and they want to make some kind of a contribution, it's an important ingredient in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think when I do crits as well, and you see people, I think what you're getting at is that you could, as a strategy, and I see this happening, where people try to sort of distinguish the object through the materials to make it more than a photograph by, drawing on it, or it has tape on it or something like that. And for me, that's just gimmickry. That doesn't, unless it's, but the thing is like in a discussion with somebody who is making something, it's important to find the appropriate materials for the thing you want to say. And, if sometimes photography's always had a defensive, complex, and is wanted to be taken seriously as an art form, and you still see today people using kind of rare processes or some sort of mixed media element or something to make the picture more dimensional or stand out as being more than a photograph. But usually that just looks kind of like an empty gambit to try and sort of create something that feels like it has more artistic worth or something like that.
Can I address that? But also there's an assumption in the question about trying to stand out. And but two of my favorite works in the collection are the Christopher Williams photo and the Robert Heineken. And in a sense, they're both trying to disappear and not author the work, in a say, and kind of hide within the language of, say, advertising or television or this kind of thing. So I'm interested in that strategy.
Yeah, no, they look like very anonymous pictures. Like no one of any sort of artistic, presence took them. They were taken just by an ad agency or whatever. And those are very slick pictures. The Heineken has this TV template lithograph over the top of it, which kind of distinguishes it an object. But that's just funny. But they're both very slick pictures and don't have a lot of object quality, in fact. But
it's almost through the most minute difference between the language of advertising and the particulars of the Christopher Williams, that there's some shred of authorship and humanity and which is quite beautiful.
There's serious meaning in the fact that it's dye transfer print, which was a process associated with advertising. It's now kind of defunct. It's toxic, and there are other ways to do things. But I mean, his choice of that medium for that particular image is hugely important. That's the meaning of the picture. But he ends up making something that just looks slickly commercial, and so you have this sort of dialogue going on between something that's something that's ordinary and commercial and something that's actually very beautiful and artistic and critical of photography and the way it sort of functions in the world between art and commerce.
Thank you all, participants, especially the panelists, and for all of you for attending. We appreciate you taking time to be with us this afternoon. The exhibition will be open for a couple more hours this evening. The galleries are open. Please go take a look. We'll be disappearing through the exit door here to sign some books, actually. So if you'd like to buy a catalogue or have your book signed, or just talk to the artist, talk to Kevin, we'll be through the door here just to your left, and we encourage you to come and chat with us. But we do have to vacate the auditorium because there's a film screening at 7. Thank you so much.